What is the nature of the self? Now, I think a better way to actually ask this question is, who are you? Who are you in the most fundamental and rudimentary sense of the word? Now, I think that when a lot of people are asked this question, their typical response is they'll give their name. Either that, or they'll talk about their social relationships. Who are you? Well, I'm a doctor, dentist, a pharmacist, a physicist, a philosopher, an educator, a musician, a parent, a sibling, a nephew, a niece, grandpa, granddaughter, and so forth. Maybe they'll answer by giving a religion. Who are you? Well, I'm a Christian, Muslim, a Hindu, a Taoist, Buddhist, and so forth. They might even talk about their political affiliations. Who are you? Well, I'm a Democrat, or a Republican, a libertarian, communist, anarchist, a totalitarian, socialist. Now, I think that all the answers that I just ended up giving, and there are so many different answers that you can end up giving. I mean, it could be something that you enjoy doing, like, who are you? I'm a gamer, or a skateboarder, or I'm a golfer, a fisherman, whatever. And I think that every answer that you can give in that type of way is artificial. It's an image that we've created for ourselves. And this image, we both had a part in its construction, and a lot of it we've got from what other people have told us about ourselves as we were growing up, how people reacted around us, and who they told us we were. And I think that all of these ideas, all of these images of ourselves that we've created are about as real as the lines of latitude and longitude. It's real, but it's not real in the same way that, say, rocks and trees and dirt is real. Now, with the lines of latitude and longitude, those are mental ideas. It's a mental map that we've created, and we've wrapped it around reality. And as a result of doing that, it's actually made the planet a little more manageable. We can actually pinpoint certain locations using these lines, and it's extremely practical. You can find real locations using an imaginary system, a mental system that we've created, and again, wrapped it around reality. But we don't confuse these lines for reality. I mean, most of us don't. I guess I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that somebody out there is actually afraid of running into the equator. It wouldn't surprise me that they were to even confuse this idea with reality. It seems like every idea is confused for reality by somebody or other. But the roles that we have, the image that we've created for ourselves, which has been referred to as the ego, which is a social construct, and it's an artificial identity that we've created. And the thing is, a lot of people confuse the true self, who they truly are, the self, who you are, and they've confused it with this image. And I think it's a very prevalent idea. It's a prevalent problem that we seem to have. We have a very, very deep habit of thinking of ourselves in relation to all the various things that I mentioned earlier. We think in terms of that. And one way that I can think about these habits of thought is it's very similar to thinking that your mind is like a piece of paper. Now, whenever you fold a piece of paper, it has a tendency to fold in the same crease over and over and over again. And the more that you fold it in one direction, the more easy it's going to be for the paper to fold in that direction again in the future. And I think that our habits of thinking of ourselves in these terms, through this artificial identity, has been so reinforced, because we reinforce it all the time. I mean, at every single waking moment, we seem to be trying to hold up an image of ourselves, and we're trying to guard it against people either looking differently upon you or thinking you are different from the image that you've created for yourself. And there's so much insecurity and frustration and worry and all this energy that we've invested by maintaining this thing, because it's very fragile and we hold it so dear, this image of ourselves. But I want to claim that this isn't you. That's not you. That's not real. It's an artificial concept that we've created, and we've held it up as if it was real. But it's almost like confusing. Let's just say you go to a planetarium, and you see these grid lines that are all shown up in the sky, and you're like, oh, cool, look at that. And but when you actually look at the sky, those lines don't actually exist. In the same way that your mental concepts, they're not actual features of reality. They're not features of your true self. So the question is, all right, so what are the features of your true self? What is the essence of yourself? What qualities does it have? And personally, I think that the nature of the self, who you truly are, the qualities that it has, is just peace and serenity. And there's a feeling of love and compassion and connectedness that you end up experiencing. These are natural qualities of the mind, and they're always there. They're not something that you obtain later on. You just have to get rid of all the mental conflict that you've created for yourself, and once you've got rid of all that, you'll end up recognizing the true self, the self underlying all of this turmoil that you've created with this image that you've been given or been built up yourself. So then, what kind of technique do we have that we can end up recognizing this true self? And I think the best answer is meditation. Meditation is what I would refer to as my third great discovery in life. My first great discovery was music. My second great discovery, philosophy. And my third great discovery is meditation. But to be perfectly honest, out of the three, that one to me is probably the most important. I seem to have discovered more about myself with meditation than the other two combined. So what do I mean by meditation? Like, what am I talking about? And a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about what meditation is, but the way that I'm using it is that meditation is nothing more than simply being mindful of your thoughts as they arise. That's it. You're not trying to prevent yourself from thinking, and I think a lot of people have that sort of idea that meditation is you're trying to force yourself to stop thinking, and it's nothing of the sort. No, what you're doing is you're allowing your mind to be aware of your thoughts as they come up and whatever emotion comes along with it. And you just take note of it. You just recognize that a thought arose. You say, cool, a thought. And then you go back to being mindful. It's like your thoughts are almost like a bird that you hear chirping outside of your door or something like that. You can notice it, but you don't identify with it. You don't elaborate upon it. You don't try to analyze it or try to distinguish what kind of bird it was and whether the sound it created was pleasant or unpleasant or good or bad or right or wrong or anything like that. You don't try to sit there and evaluate it or chase it around, because whenever you chase your thoughts around, eventually they'll come to define you. And the more that you end up defining yourself in terms of these images, the more that reality will end up conflicting with you, because that image that you've created for yourself doesn't always hold up that well. And that's the source of a lot of our conflict, if not the source of a lot of our mental conflict. So by simply allowing your mind to rest in that state, where you allow yourself to think, it's just the nature of the mind to have thoughts in the same way that it's the nature of water to flow downhill. It's a thinking entity. And what you do is you just allow it to do that. Allow it to go off on just to have thoughts arise and come up, and certain emotions will come up with it as well too. And you allow that to happen, but you don't identify with it. You don't elaborate upon them. You just be like, cool, a thought, and you go back to being mindful. Now, I think that what ends up happening is that as you do this, and as you become aware of your thoughts and you don't identify with them, you allow them to pass without any conflict or without any grasping or any sort of trying to get away from it or anything like that, attachment or aversion. You're not trying to do that at all, and as a result, your mind naturally ends up settling out. And then the natural qualities of the mind start coming through or shining through. that peacefulness, that serenity, that sense of being where everything is just perfect and content. You're content with just being, and you've identified some qualities of yourself that has nothing to do with your ego, without any image that you're holding. There is no image. There is no sense of conflictive thought or anything like that. You simply end up being there. And a way of thinking about that now is that if I have a puddle of water, and say I have a rock and I throw it into the water, and all of that dirt and soot that was on the bottom of this pond ends up getting casted into the water, and it makes it all murky and dark, and you can't quite see through it anymore. Now, I think this is a bit of a metaphor for the mind, in that you're thinking right now, all your judgments, all your evaluating, all your analyzing and trying to see whether or not things are in your favor or against your favor, or whatever it may end up being there. All these thoughts that just bam, 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 bam. All these thoughts are like this soot that's been casted into this water, and it ends up creating a very murky sense. And I think that the clear water is your natural mind, your true self, who you truly are. The sense of being that's free from all identity, that's spontaneous and free, and there's so much life and exuberance within that state when you're not trying to hold an image, and I think that is the clear water. So whenever you have all of this soot and dirt that's been thrown up into this clearness, what do you do to get the water back to its natural state? And that's just to let the mind grow still. And I think that's what sort of meditation allows. It allows the mind to eventually grow still. You eventually end up taming your mind by allowing it to just think, allow it to do whatever it's doing, but you don't identify with it. You just allow each thought to arise and pass without any conflict. And eventually the mind naturally ends up relaxing itself. It ends up reaching a state where there is no thought anymore. And oh my gosh, once you reach that state, it's therapeutic. It's absolutely blissful to stay in that state. And it's rejuvenating, and it ends up creating a very wonderful way of thinking that allows spontaneity and freedom and joy and all these wonderful emotions to be experienced, because you're not trying to have this image of yourself. You're not trying to play the game of society, because I think a lot of people are playing the game very poorly, where that image of themselves is actually probably one of the worst things that they could possibly have for their mind. It's ruining their mind. It's ruining their sense of peace and all of those natural qualities that I talked about. I mean, it's ruining all of those qualities. It's taking that natural clarity and it's just throwing a rock in there, and all of a sudden all that soot and all that debris ends up getting kerned up. But again, I think that you can end up finding your true self, the self beyond the image of yourself, beyond that sense of identity that society has basically stapled onto your forehead and be like, there you are, that's you, that's defined as you. But once you can get rid of that, there's a certain freedom and a certain energy that's a part of it, because, as I mentioned, the more you try to hold on to this image of yourself, the more difficult it becomes, and the more exhausting and frustrating and anxiety-ridden your life becomes. But I think that, in the end of it all, I think that it's good to be balanced, to have both sides of those ideas. I mean, it's okay to have an image of yourself. I'm not necessarily saying that's innately bad. In the same way that the lines of latitude and longitude aren't bad because they're mental ideas. They may be artificial, but they can be helpful. So your image of yourself can end up increasing the quality of your life, and it could end up giving you a certain sense of meaning and direction, and that's great. But you just don't identify with it too strongly, because I think that it's equally as important to be able to recognize those true qualities, who you truly are, the self beyond the image of yourself. And I think that the nature of the self is beyond all of your images. But to have both of those and to be balanced within that, I think is a wonderful way to live.